right, good. Oop, let's pause that. There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. There's that beautiful face. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of GCTV. I'm your host, Nick Carter, and before we get to everything tonight, we have a special video we'd like to premiere, and here you go with it. Don't want to see me.
I remember I started acting here more than 30 years ago through Actors Community Theater, and then we found our permanent home at the Garfield. And we've put on concerts, we've put on plays, we've put on musicals. People have been able to see their friends, their family members, their teachers up on stage doing things that they only ever dreamt of doing before.
After living in this area for a few years, a friend said something to me that I hadn't considered, but made perfect sense. He said that of all of the towns on the Eastern Shore, if you are an artist or an intellectual or anything related to that, you have a home more than anywhere else in Chestertown.
So it's always been my key bucket list thing to have a theater that it was mine and a place that I could go and be a part of theater on a daily basis. And when I found the Garfield, that's exactly what I found. A place that I fit in, a place that I could really be myself and expand myself within the confines of this wonderful space.
The Garfield Center for the Arts has shown me a side of myself that I didn't know existed and introduced me to a side of Kent County and a whole community of people who I probably wouldn't have known otherwise. So when I think about what the theater means to me, that's pretty huge. And so I hope that we will all do our part in whatever way you can right now to support the theater, whether you can do it financially, whether you can do it physically, whether you can do it just by helping spread the word of mouth, because eventually things will return to normal, and we want great local institutions like our community theaters to be there for us so that they can continue to help show us the best parts of ourselves and of our community.
Well, so thank you everyone who was a part of that. We love you all and can't wait to see you back in the theater when we reopen. Now, I wouldn't be doing my part if I didn't include that if you enjoy what you see here this evening or have seen here on past evenings, we ask that you please consider donating to the Garfield Center for the Arts by visiting garfieldcenter.org/donate/. I still haven't figured out whether or not you need that last slash, so it's on there. I say put it in there. So tonight, Lindsay Lusby, pardon me, local poet. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn things over to her and let her talk. Hey, all right, bye.
Hello.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, am I on?
Oh yeah, you're good to go.
Cool. All right. Hi. I am Lindsay Lusby, live from my bedroom on Cannon Street in Chestertown. And I am a local poet. I had my first book, Catechesis, postpastoral, come out from the University of Utah Press just about a year ago. This baby will be a year old in August. So that's very exciting for me personally, obviously. I have been writing poetry since I was in single digits, I guess like second or third grade. I started writing poetry. So this is a dream a long time in the making. and hopefully there will be more books in the future. So tonight I am here to share some poems from my newish book, and then I also have some newer poems to share with you. So to start, I usually, when I do readings, explain a little bit about the title because it has two big words that most people don't use on a regular basis. So it's called a catechesis, postpastoral, and the idea was to combine a lot of my influences in my poetry in the title itself. So catechesis comes from a Christian catechism, which is basically the teachings of the church. I grew up Roman Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic. I would consider myself much more agnostic these days, but still that has formed a lot of the way that I think. I feel like Catholicism has created kind of the architecture of how I think of how I see and experience story and narrative in the world. So catechesis is the body of oral stories and teachings that are passed down, especially to children in the church. And in that way, it kind of reminded me of the definition of folk tales and fairy tales that do the same thing, but in a secular way. Although there are a number of fairy tales out there, especially Grimm fairy tales that have very Christian overtones to them. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that I'm meshing together is influences of my Catholic upbringing with fairy tales and folk tales, which are a personal obsession of mine. A postpastoral gives you the setting. So the postpastoral is kind of a newish movement in poetry and in literature in general. And it comes from the idea of the pastoral, which is writing that embraces a very romanticized view of nature and praises all of the traditionally beautiful things in nature. The post-pastoral praises the beauty of the things that are not traditionally considered beautiful, like deformity, decay, mutation, things like that, that I and many other writers out there find natural beauty in. So that's a lot of what's going on in the book. And okay, so that was a bit of a long introduction. Normally I can see people's faces to know whether I'm completely boring them or if they're making connections. So I'm just gonna go with you're still listening. So the first group of poems that I wanted to share from this collection is a group of poems that are about one of my favorite horror movies. That's another big influence for me. And this movie is The Silence of the Lambs. So let's see. The idea for the main idea that follows throughout the series is that all of the titles of the poems are lines of dialogue that I borrowed directly from the movie. So those were my jumping off points for the poems, and then I tried to take them in a bunch of weird directions. I tried to tie them to fairy tale themes and things like that. So I'm going to read you some creepy poems. This first one is called "Do You Spook Easily, Starling?" A stone slungshot in the brush is a body face down in the river. We drop our scavenging and scatter. Every shattered thing underfoot we will call evidence. The map we make of it a murder. And one thing that's unusual about this poetry collection is I actually have some visual poetry pieces in it as well, which visual poetry can take on many forms. Mine is mixed media. I basically cut up a bunch of used books, not rare editions, stuff that there were many, many copies of in the world, and reconstructed them, recombined them in a way that was evocative to me and that I felt paired well with the text poems that they appear next to. So I won't show all of those because it's kind of hard to make out well over the computer, but I just wanted to mention that. The next poem is called "That Is Rather Slippery of You, Agent Starling." When the truth is small enough to fit in your cupped hands, you chase it with the broom to every corner of the house, to pin its bristling body there against the papered cabbage roses. When it beats between your fingers, all sinews snap and barbed air, you will know it is less hope than feather, more crush than bone. When I started writing these poems, it was kind of a revelation to me because this was the first time that I'd ever even attempted to write poems about horror movies. I assumed that that was out of the realm of poetic subject matter, and I was wrong, of course. So that was kind of it was a real breakthrough for me when I realized I could write poems about my favorite horror movies, which I'm a huge horror movie fan. I watch way too many. So that just opened up a whole new world of potential poems for me. And my way into that, I've always been obsessed with fairy tales. I'm just beyond enchanted with how weird and dark they can be, and just the strange details that really bring them through, and it's those details that I kind of latch onto and try to create new poems out of, as a general rule. But with The Silence of the Lambs, the thing that I found the most inspiring in a I want to write poems about this sense is it finally occurred to me how evocative Clarice Starling's name is. She's a bird. A starling is a bird. So it's pretty common in fairy tales for humans to turn into animals and animals to turn into humans and back and forth. So that kind of became my way into writing these poems, by turning Clarice Starling into a bird. But she's both bird and woman at the same time. She kind of goes back and forth through these poems. This next one is called "Why Do You Think He Removes Their Skins, Agent Starling?" Are you a bird in a woman's suit, Clarice? Some pretty little blood sparrow, such lung span, such bright palpitation. Red thread, red thread, red thread. Peeled back, you are the same shade of robin redbreast. You are plucked up, ready for love to wear you like a girl pelt and preen. And this next one is called "Look at Him Starling, Tell Me What You See," or still life with crime scene photos and newspaper clippings. We will know him by the bodies of his work, an arm unsleeved of skin and another. A blouse split of the back like a ladybird. Witness in the mud well of a boot print, gunpowder and moth wing. There, a ditch-deep arrangement of ankles. Here, a headline reads, "Fathers, hide your daughters." So I do want to explain a little bit about this next one. It is inspired by a perfume. And it's a perfume that appears in, or that is mentioned in the movie, The Silence of the Lambs. So I had this editing project with a friend and mentor of mine, Jean Debreau. We put together a poetry anthology called The Book of Scented Things back in 2014. And it's an entire anthology of brand new poems that are inspired by perfumes. And that's 100 new poems from 100 different poets across the country. We sent them a vial of, or not, very, very small tester size vial of perfume, and everybody got something different, and we asked them to write a new poem after spending some time with the scent, smelling it, and just letting their mind free associate. So these poems ended up being about so many different things. It was just the scent was the jumping off point that pointed them in a certain direction. So after doing that, which was a lot of fun, it's a lot of fun to write for prompts. A friend of mine pointed out that there is a perfume in The Silence of the Lambs, and I was waist deep in writing this series at that time. So that friend suggested that I should write a perfume poem as part of the series, and that turned into this one. So there's the perfume called L'air du Temps, and that was I don't want to say popular, because I can't verify that, because I wasn't around I was very small in the 80s. But apparently this was a scent that was around in the 80s, and that Clarice Starling wore in the movie. There's that very iconic scene where Hannibal Lecter is pressed up against the glass of his cell, and he sniffs her through the glass, and he can smell that she was wearing this perfume a few days ago. Anyway, long story. This is the poem that I wrote after I bought a vial of that perfume and spent some time with it. It wasn't a perfume that I actually really liked very much, but I got a good poem out of it, I think. And the title is "How Do We Begin to Covet Clarice?" After L'air du Temps, Nina Ricci. When a look is not enough, you must dig a hole inside her and bury your ruin there. In the hollow of her, offerings of clovebud and oak moss, sawdust and rosewater. Smell the florid rot of want, the humid musk of need. Let them choke on each other until they are one blurred retching, a wintering hawk moth pulled whole from your throat. So hopefully, even if you haven't seen The Silence of the Lambs, you're still able to you're still able to get something out of these poems. That was the intent. But if you have seen the movie, there are a lot more. There's some Easter eggs in there that people can find and say, hey, I know that from the movie. I also read the book when I was working on these as well. So this is the last one in this series, and it's called Have the Lambs Stopped Screaming? When you find him, will you ask for a glass of water, for a handful of sugar, to use the phone? Already she is hanging inside him from a meat hook, a field-dressed tenderfoot swinging by her ankles, Does he know that you know? When he is asleep, rip him open like a barn door. So, so I have some other more explicitly fairy tale poems in this book, but when I do readings, I really like to stick with the horror movie poems because I don't know, I feel like they have even more general appeal, especially because people are always surprised that yes, you can write poems about horror movies. They have that same little realization I did. So there is one other series of poems in the book that is about one of my favorite horror movies. And this one is about Alien. So hopefully for people who know and love that movie, hopefully you'll get a little something extra out of these poems. And then for the rest of you, I hope there's still something there for you. So I really took these in another very weird direction. My aesthetic is very earthy. It's not very very spaceship or outer space. So I wanted to bring that story down to earth a little bit, but still keep it really weird. So there's a lot of plants in here that kind of take on that that monstrous aspect. And again, as with the Silence of the Lambs poems, all of the poems in this series borrow their titles from the movie. The titles are lines of dialogue directly from the movie. Just keeping an eye on my time. So this one is called What's the Story, Mother? Take comfort in this. You are not dear to me. O night of desirable objects, you are the honey trap I cast deep into this bracken of asters and catchflies. You will watch the dark undress, peel back its beard of sepals. Do not call out for me. Let this pale hand cover your mouth. Let it smother you with my love. So for people who are familiar with the movie, that's the face hugger scene. And like with the Silence of the Lambs poems, there are visual poems that are paired. Again, mixed media collage method. This one is called Wait a Minute, There's Movement. It seems to have life, organic life. And the epigraph reads, Denver corpse flower finally blooms, stinks up botanic garden. Headline from the Washington Post, August 19, 2015. You want to know what it is to play mother? A fist furled inside your gut, tight as a fiddlehead. Then the moment it splits open your abdomen, a bloom of umbilicus, purpling like dead meat. Your own doom pushing up and up leaves you a blown out husk, still warm, still wet. When they come to collect what's left, tell them it was never worth this. So for the people who remember back in 2015, all botanical gardens across the country that had corpse flowers, they were all blooming at the same time. And the thing about a corpse flower is, well, a few things about a corpse flower. They only bloom every several years. I don't remember the exact number right now, but when they bloom, they open up and they release this scent of rotting meat. And they do that to bring in insects to help pollinate. And apparently it's really, really pungent. And when I was watching a lot of the live feeds that were happening as people were waiting for this corpse flower that was slowly opening. And as I was watching it, it really reminded me of the eggs in Alien that the face huggers pop out of. So I was feeling a little anxious while I was watching that. This next one is called "You Still Don't Understand What You're Dealing With, Do You?" And the epigraph reads, "Natural selection cannot fashion perfect organisms. The Evolutions of Populations, Campbell Biology Textbook." Inside its mouth, another mouth. A fearful symmetry that rips through every soft-bellied thing like worms through wet earth. On top of bone, more moon-bright bone. Holds the night bloom of your face in thrall, and you will tremble at the feet of all its terrible glory. Behold, child, this is Leviathan. And I'm going to show this one because this is probably my favorite visual poem that I did. It combines some illustrations from Gray's Anatomy textbook, which is all anatomical illustrations, with wildflower illustrations, which is one of the main texts that I worked with, was the wildflower book that kind of connects them all together. So I took a final column and then added the elements to it. That plant is called false dragon head, the actual plant. A lot of fun working on those. Okay, so another thing that I really like to mention, just because it surprised me, and is when I was writing these poems, I really thought going into it that these alien poems would be in the voice of, or really at least follow closely Ripley, who is the hero of the movie, strong female hero. And of course, you know, every little girl wants to be Ripley when they grow up. Even little boys want to be Ripley when they grow up. So I was really surprised when I was writing these poems that as I was writing them, I was finding that I was more and more drawn to a different character, one that we might not even consider a character in the technical sense of the word, the ship computer, which was called Mother, and it's really just a voice. But as the movie goes on and on, she really takes on more of an ominous and cruel sort of personality, and becomes less of a setting and more of a person who is inflicting this on the human characters. And so I found that she really reminded me of a fairy tale character archetype, the cruel, callous mother figure, who is willing to sacrifice her children in order to survive, or just because she feels like it, just because it will be more convenient for her. So that became my central fairy tale connection that I found. So some of the fairy tales that really utilize that character archetype are like Hansel and Gretel and the juniper tree, especially the juniper tree, which is really messed up and really dark. So I drew a lot from the juniper tree in particular for this next poem, which is called "I Can't Lie to You About Your Chances, but You Have My Sympathies." The truth is, when you die in your dreams, you wake here. Sap stuck beneath a juniper, bones turning back to egg white. What kind of mother watches her children consumed and does not consume herself? Your small body held milk warm in the throat and unmade there. Now, make it new again. This next one is called We've Got This Far, We Must Go On. We have to go on. You come back as a bird in the air shafts. Strike yourself against the walls like a match and burn. Little flamethrower, your mother is counting down the seconds until she is no one's mother. Mother airlocked, mother sputtering, mother singing her last bird prayer. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And then this is the last poem in this sequence. And it's called You Are My Lucky Star, which is the song that Ripley is singing to herself at the end before she blows the alien out of her shuttle. You are my lucky star. My unmothered bird, dropped from the sky like a millstone. If you outlive the fall, crawl from your crater like the second coming, like the swell of new growth after fire, just briars and briars and briars. So that's the last one I'll read from the book. I have, I think, five new poems that I wanted to read as well, written over the last year or so. So I had so much fun writing those horror movie poems for the book that I really wanted to keep doing it. It was just a really fun experiment that turned into something kind of defining for my poetic voice, I think. So last year I decided I would take on Poltergeist, which is another one of my favorite horror movies. And it filled the criteria of having a strong female hero at the center. Poltergeist actually has a few strong female heroes at its center. So again, I borrowed lines of dialogue from the movie for the titles. And this first one is called, We Were Wondering If You Had Experienced Any Disturbances Lately. When the closet light is the closest light to heaven, do you know where your children are? Sometimes the moon circles the moth. Sometimes its gravity grows like moss down one side of you. When the light pulls you, it opens like a throat blooming, a nimbus of ghost pipe, bone bright and yawning. Stay away from the light. For those who aren't familiar with Poltergeist, it's a ghost movie. Just to provide a little extra context there. The title of this next one, This House Has Many Hearts. This rope double knotted around your waist. Tie one end to what you love, the other to what scares you. This possession is a splinter under each of your fingernails, a nail between each rib rafter. Your blood beat louder at each entrance wound. You, possessed by a house, possessed by the dead, possessed by your daughter. All of this hereaftering in your here and your now, your own heart hammering in the walls. They linger in a perpetual dream state. We begin a canary in a cigar box, buried in the backyard under dandelion and clover, yellow for wilt and yellow for wane. Roots stitch through us new arteries, capillaries fine as the down of dead metal, dissecting and suturing our bodies like topsoil. We see a light and we count until we hear anything at all. Where else would we go than this grave and grassy bed? How else should we sleep but like the dead? And this is the last poltergeist poem, and then I have one more for you after this. This one is called Now Clear Your Minds, It Knows What Scares You. In your dreams of a disembodied daughter, she is blue teleglow, a bioluminescent voice flung and flown like fireflies. She is in the night arms of the dead tree outside your window. You feel her move through you like moonlight, so softly with small, cold hands. And what now? While she's spiderwebbed between here and gone, the orb weaver is listening for any disturbance of her silk threads, any windblown cry from mother caught and clung there. And then I just have one more poem I'd like to close with. This is another weird, kind of creepy poem, but is a little more personal, but also still strays into fabulous and fairy tale territory. This one is called Mother as Haunting as Mourning Dove. My mother's mother has the softest feathers I have ever touched, like the gray dust of mothwing scales, marking my impious hands with ash. The brightest color she owns is the dusk pink of her taloned feet and toes, the bloodless blue of her closed eyelids. Is it true her bones are hallowed? The way my mother holds her small body could make me believe in life after. My mother looks for owls at the window, holy ghosts in the early morning dark. But a dove at moonset sounds like this, the long and spectral O of longing that wakes her to half-light and hoarfrost, where mother is just a psalm we sing to the answering ether. Thank you so much. I just wanted to close with one little note. Recently I have left my job and I am now freelancing full-time, and one of the things that I am freelancing with is poetry coaching and poetry consultations. I know there are a lot of secret poets out there. There are a lot of not so secret poets out there. If you need some guidance, if you need someone to work on line edits for individual poems for you, if you have a manuscript that you want someone to take a look at for you, work on reorganizing line edits for each of those poems. I also do guidance for literary magazine and book submissions for poetry. Hit me up on my website if you want to hire me. I do poetry coaching on an ongoing basis, hourly, and then I also offer individual consultations for specific things. My website is www.lindsaylusby.com. And I do more than just creepy poems. So if you write poems that are less creepy, I can still help you with those. I love all kinds of poems. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for for showing up for poetry. And thank you so much to Nick and Megan at the Garfield Center for inviting me to be here with you guys and to read my poetry to you. Thank you so much, Garfield Center.
Thanks, Lindsay. So let me All right. So that was awesome. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here tonight. That your poetry is just incredible. So if you enjoyed what you've seen here this evening, we ask that you please consider donating to the Garfield Center for the Arts by visiting garfieldcenter.org/donate/. Next week, we will be having the GCTV Public Access Kids Edition. Nope, I'm sorry. let me get this straight. Next week is the Annie Encore, which will be a retrospective to last year's Annie. And then the following week will be the GCTV Public Access Kids Edition that was planned for this week. So we hope to see you there. We have some other really fun stuff coming up in June. Now it's June. July's coming. There we go. So we hope that you enjoy it. And if you are interested in Lindsay's work, her website, or we have a link to her website in the description, which if this is on YouTube, it will be below us. If this is on Facebook, it's either above us or to the side. I don't know. Facebook's weird. But everybody, you have a great night, and I'll see you next week.